you everyone for coming. It's wonderful to see you all in these galleries. Welcome to the very first of our New Jersey Arts Annual Artist Series. My name is Sarah Goldman. I'm the Assistant Curator of Fine Art here at the New Jersey State Museum, as well as the, wheeling this around, like I'm at the airport, at the New Jersey State Museum, and I'm also the curator of this exhibition, the 2022 New Jersey Arts Annual Reemergence. Like I said, thank you for joining us today. And yeah, the purpose of this lunchtime series of talks is to really offer additional context for and insight into specific works in the exhibition through a unique opportunity to interact directly with the artists featured and learn from them and their practices. Just a few thank yous. The New Jersey Arts Annual Reemergence is a project of the New Jersey State Council on the Arts and the New Jersey State Museum. Funding for the exhibition in this program have been made possible in part by funds from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts and additional support from the New Jersey State Museum Foundation through the Lucille M. Paris Fund. So today we are privileged to have two artists present to speak about their works in the galleries, Donte Hayes and Donna Conklin. I'll offer some brief introductions of the artists now, but I'll refrain from speaking too much about their work since that's what they're here to do. So Donte Hayes' ceramic sculptures with these really beautiful, rich, intensely worked over textural surfaces are equally inspired by traditional African heirlooms and rituals as they are by, his interest in science fiction and hip hop culture. Hayes received his BFA summa cum laude from Kennesaw State University in Georgia and his MA and MFA with honors from the University of Iowa. In addition to this exhibition, Hayes has been featured in recent group shows at the Trout Museum of Art in Appleton, Wisconsin, the Newark Museum of Art, and the 2021 Atlanta Biennial, and was given a solo presentation at the 2021 Armory Show Art Fair in New York City. His work is included in various permanent collections, including the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian Museum of American Art in DC, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, the Newark Museum of Art, and the Institute Museum of Ghana in Accra. He is the grand prize winner of the Coined in the South 2022 exhibition at the Mint Museum, and then 2019 winner of the 1858 prize for the contemporary Southern art from the Gibbs Museum of Art, and he's represented by Mindy Solomon Gallery in Miami, Florida. Donna Conklin here is known for concrete sculptures that explore the relationship between nature, architecture, and the complexities of the human condition. Conklin studied lithography and sculpture at Skidmore College, followed by an apprenticeship at the Johnson Atelier Fine Art Foundry, where she learned welding and lost wax bronze casting, receiving her MFA in sculpture from Rutgers University, Mason Gross School of Art. She has exhibited throughout the United States in solo exhibitions at the Monmouth Museum, Index Art Center in Newark, Johnson & Johnson in New Brunswick, and the Educational Testing Center in Princeton. She's a recipient of a fellowship in sculpture from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts and has been included in the last 3 New Jersey Arts Annual exhibitions. Her work can be found in the Museum of Modern Artists book collection, the collections of the Newark Public Library and Skidmore College. Her public sculptures can be found at Wildflower Sculpture Park and the Turtleback Zoo in Essex County, New Jersey. So please, join me in welcoming these 2 accomplished artists to our galleries.
Thank you.
So I will be passing the mic over to Donte, who will get us kicked off. So I will, this is a gallery talk, which involves a little walk as well over to Donte's work, which we will lead the way.
First of all, I want to say everyone thank you, and come on, let's welcome each other.
Yeah.
As you can see, this work is all sculptural and it's ceramic. And first of all, You can get a little closer if you want to see it, because like this work is about welcome. That's what I believe in, welcoming. Because a lot of times when you look at ceramics, you're afraid to touch it unless it's like a cup. But you know, so it's funny to see this work in a glass. Because like, if it wasn't in a glass, most likely people would want to touch it.
Absolutely.
So I just like to first like try to bring up, before we even talk about content, I'll just like, sometimes people just want to know like how I made the work. So first of all the work isn't glazed. I usually used to make my own clay, but now that, you know, I live in New Jersey, I don't have the space to make that kind of work. So now like I get like different places I give them my recipe, clay recipe, and they make it for me. So, but in grad school, I was making my own clay, and I was so interested in like different clay bodies because so much of clay is always a part of what? Glazing. And I felt like glazing was taking away from the texture. So I started to really go deep into what are the different clay bodies I could choose. And I felt like this clay body really spoke to not just content, but also thinking about things historically, spiritually, and also like it looks kind of science fiction, which I love. So I have actually how I make the work. And each piece is made by regular potter's needle tool. So you're gonna see that. Here guys, y'all, check it out. You can pass it around.
Show and tell.
Yeah. It's only $1.99. It's nothing like something crazy that you can buy. It's like, you know, George, you know, it's like a regular potter's needle tool. We all have one that's a potter, you know. So I make the form, and they're all coils. So I make a coil, and then I smooth out the coil, the outer. And first of all, it's hollow. So if you flip these over, I kind of see these as vessels flipped upside down, speaking about how crazy the world is right now, you know? So then I make the form. Then how do I make these different like protrusions and I just, instead of using a mallet or something wood to like flatten it, I just use my hand. So this piece here is called crevice. And I thought that would be great if I just used my hand and push the form in. So like I said, once the form is smoothed out, you don't see any coils. The form is now smooth. Then I take that needle tool that everyone saw, and I just make marks. And I kind of see these as like three-dimensional prints. I have a background in printmaking, so a lot of my knowledge base is coming from like doing an etching plate. You know, just like the needle tool and an etching plate. So I'm using that same technique. And why do I care about that? It's because of the research. I'm a research-based artist. I'm not an emotional artist. I'm not an interdisciplinary artist. I'm a research-based artist. I only make artwork for about 3 months out of the year. 9 months of the year is me planning, reading, watching crappy TV. Sometimes good TV, but a lot of times it's crappy. But you know, all different things. Cooking, talking to like, doing a visiting artist thing, or just talking to other people that you're friends, or people that are not my friends, and how we have that dialogue of back and forth. So I put all those things in my mind. Sometimes I write them, some things I like take notes in the book that I'm reading, and then I make work. You know, so like I said, I don't make a lot of work, but when I do make work, I make it. So, because I feel like in ceramics, as we all know, how do we know civilization? We know civilization through the clay. Do the ceramic pieces, those shards that we get, we will know that, okay, this is the kind of food they ate because this is the bowl that they use. So when I make work, it's going to be here forever. So I better not make something that's garbage. I better make something that means something. So now we're starting to talk about why I'm making the work. As Sarah said, my work is based on artifacts and heirlooms of Africa. And why I care about that is because growing up all the way to undergrad, every time we spoke about slavery, because we didn't even say enslaved, we said slavery back then. All we said was, oh, they were on a boat. They came to the Americas, and then from there they were slaves, and then thank God it was, you know, Abraham Lincoln and all this, it's freed the slaves. Okay, first of all, let's stop. Africa is a continent. It's not a country. So how come we're not even giving these people respect and say what country they came from? I didn't even know that. We couldn't even say a region. We couldn't even say, is it Western Africa or, you know, Southern Africa. Most likely they came from West Africa. So my wife, I guess 2 years ago, she gave me a great gift of like ancestry. And finding my ancestry was like from Ghana and Burkina Faso. And so most of those people that were on those ships came from my ancestry. And it was probably really powerful because that's the reason, one of the reasons why I went to the University of Iowa, because of their collection of African objects. Because I always felt like, how come I didn't know anything about where we came from? So that's the reason why I even care about this. And two, is because when I want to look at work, I don't want you to think, oh, this is just about blackness. When I look at an artist that's white or look at an artist that's Asian, I don't think it only speaks to them. I say it speaks to humanity. So when these works, when you look at these works, I'm talking about humanity. So the first piece here is called Reconcile. And this piece is like coming from my research, yeah, right here on the right. And this one's coming from my research of the different domiciles in Burkina Faso. This is like one of the huts where they would live, that shape. And so I'm thinking about that shape as a way of, that is something welcoming. Because when you saw that shape, you know you're going home. But also the way of the texture. So I'm thinking about the texture, because I want textures also to represent what is home to us. Because we don't think of home as the house that we live in. We think about the memories that we keep. And what is the greatest thing about clay? It holds memory. So I'm thinking about the way it's made. I'm thinking about the waves in the ship coming from West Africa all the way to the Americas. I'm thinking about the music I'm listening to, which is usually hip hop. So I'm listening to that vibe. So when you look at it, it also has like a look like to the point that I'm vibing off of the clay and that needle tool. To the point that some people think it's three-dimensionally created. It's not by hand. So I call this piece Reconcile because we have to reconcile, especially since this show is called Reemergence. We have to reconcile that we're not doing what we say we are. You know, because if that was the case, we wouldn't have BLM happening in 2020. We wouldn't have had George Floyd and Breonna Taylor dying in 2020, and then all these people dying that are still dying because of COVID. We have to reconcile that we need to do better. This work is not about the outer body. This is talking about the inner body. Just like the house is the inner body. You can have a house that looks great outside, but inside, you don't want to live there. You know, you don't want to live there. And that's how we should be feeling. We have a home. Each of us are walking around in our body, but I'm not talking about the outer body, I'm talking about the inner body. And if we're going to re-emerge out of all this stuff that we've been going through, we have to reconcile that we got to do better internally. So that's what piece is about. This piece here is called Vision, and I always believe that there should be always hope in your work, and that one's right here. So when a lot of times when you see, if you go on my website, and I'll plug that too, DonteKHayes.com. But and you can go to Instagram at DonteKHayes.com. But when you look at a lot of my works, you might see a lot of bulbous shapes in the piece. One that comes from vessels of Ghana and Burkina Faso and Nigeria. So the vessels, a lot of them have bulbous shapes. But I'm not from Africa. I'm just from the African diaspora. I think crazy. I think about science fiction. I'm a nerd. So when I saw those, I thought of the Dalek in Doctor Who. If anyone ever seen Doctor Who, it's like one of the greatest TV shows, at least to me, you know, ever made. It's like the longest running TV show ever, not just science fiction, but TV shows. And one of the characters is Daleks, and they say, exterminate, exterminate. And I was like, wow, that's deep. But I'm flipping that idea of the Dalek, because if you ever go look it up, and please look it up if you don't know what it is, they have these bulbous shapes for their bodies. Okay, so that's one part. Now in the second half, when I was talking about this piece here, I was like saying that we're talking about the inner body. So I'm thinking about the stress ball. You know, so that ball is like a stress ball. So we all have levels of how high we're going to be anxiety or stress in our lives. And how high can we take that? You know, we were talking before we even started about how crazy it is now from getting out of the pandemic, how bad everyone's driving lately. You know what I mean? And that's the stress ball coming in because people's stress has like totally changed. And so this piece is like the idea of the vision. Are we going to have a vision that we're going to either be the Dalek, or we're going to be the stress ball, or we're going to take those things together and be better people when we speak to one another? So finally, this piece here is called Crevice. And this one is coming more from the historical idea because it doesn't look like hair, it looks more like hair and coral. And growing up, yeah, I know this is stupid, I never knew that coral was white. I mean, I'm colored. I always thought it was white only. Because when you would go to like museums and they would put you into the upstairs and start from the upstairs. They always start you from the upstairs and then take you down. And then by the end, you go to the gift shop. And at the gift shop, there was always white coral there. And it was always expensive. It was always right next to like the geos and all the different color stuff. And I always thought it was white. So I started thinking about, wow, it was actually colored. That means they were dead. So I was going back to my ideas of the Atlantic slave trade and thinking about like, those beautiful people, how come I didn't even know what kind of food they ate? What kind of names did they have? You know, what kind of toys did they have? You know, what did they do when there was parties? How come I didn't know anything like that? So, and then they would be pushed overboard or thrown overboard because there was no more food and you had to try to make it to all the way to the new world. So their lives were no longer themselves. They became a part of the Atlantic of all the different coral that was on there. So I was kind of saying this was kind of like a poetic ending. So that's the reason why I call it Crevice, because there's so many people who are being marginalized, but yet why should they be marginalized? And I'm not just talking about black people, I'm talking about all people. You know, so this work is more about humanity as well as someone who's coming from a historical background. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Pass the mic.
The material?
Yes.
I know that you make your own clay,
Yeah.
but like, how do you get it the color that it is?
Oh yes. So when it's wet, it'll look brown to you. It'll look like a brownish red color. But then once it's fired, because of the mason stain that's inside it, it'll turn black on its own. I fired the cone 5 for those who are ceramic artists, and that's just means how hot it is. You know, cone. And the reason why I care about the color, because I wanted to make the content the art. You know what I mean? The actual material is content. Why do I want to put something on top? Because clay is beautiful. You know what I mean? And I'm also trying to say that, yeah, black and brown people are beautiful, but we only see them outwardly. We only see like the Oprah, the LeBron. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying, what about the intellect? You know? Is beautiful too. The intellect could be just as beautiful. And that's not a lot of times we're talking about. And that's the reason why I'm glad I'm in the show, because I'm not the only artist that's working clay. George is working in clay, and Judy, who's right next to me, is working in clay. But it's also powerful that this show is, everyone is involved. It's not just one race as well. So it's like, this is an opportunity to see this work in its true nature. You know, like, the knowledge that I'm receiving isn't like this idea of the shithole country, that only people that are from this country you can learn from. You know, you can learn from anyone.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned about the universality of your work, I mean, the material itself is clay.
Yeah.
Ceramics is amongst the most, every civilization has its own, you know, ceramic clay vessels.
Right.
And like you said, that is the archaeological content that gets left behind. That's how we learn about our pasts. And I think it's, the material itself is ancient and carries so much meaning. And it's, I think that's the beauty of ceramics, how much the form, it tells you so much about the content itself.
And that's the reason why I call this work future artifacts, because I'm just vibing and remixing what has already been made. But I'm speaking about the present so we can make a better future for each of us. And you can't make a better future if our mind state is still thinking the same way. If we're still saying the same things, and then 35 years later, we're wondering why, how come a lot of people of color are not coming to this museum? They don't feel welcome here, because we keep thinking the same things. We need to stop thinking like that and think internally. How would I feel if I wanted to be welcome in here? How would I do that? Or whatever it could be just a museum, it could be anything, but we're always talking about how we're going to bring more people to museums.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is the way you can bring more people to museums. Let's start thinking about how we would feel if we were not at this museum. How would you bring that person there?
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to go outside the museum to bring them in.
Right, and thinking always, you know, museums we're always thinking, you know, how are we custodians of the art of our past
Yes.
and the present, but it is really, I think what's really interesting about your work is how much you do think about the future and
Yes.
civilizations of the future, looking back at, you know, what might be in a museum
Right.
at that point.
But I'm saying, I'm hopefully that this will be the catalyst to create that real museum,
Yeah,
that we can see all humanity. Because instead, we might just see this as an utopian or dystopian.
mm-hmm.
That this is just going to be some shard for the next people that don't even know what this means.
Yeah.
All right, Billy.
Is this part of a body of work that you've done or you're doing?
Oh, well, yeah, I first started this idea coming from the University of Iowa, and I graduated in 2020, and I started making this work that looks similar to this in 2018, because when I got there, I'm originally from Georgia, but I moved here, my wife is from New Jersey, so we moved here because that's where she works at and stuff. And I was like, I can make art anywhere. I don't have to tell you to leave. You can stay, you already have a career. You know, Jersey's a great place to be at, right? So, right?
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, so this is coming from my time in grad school, and I was like the only person of color in Iowa that I knew. Most of the people there were, well, there was like one Asian person, and then like I was the black person. You know what I mean? So it was like you didn't see a lot of people that were like diverse. So I didn't really, and people don't know how to welcome people anymore. And so I was thinking about what constitutes welcoming. And so I was trying to think of all these different things, textural, what would make you want to welcome someone. So that's where it's coming from.
This piece is titled Puddle, and it is concrete. It's cast concrete. And it's from my cast container series. It's one of the last pieces from that series that I actually had made and sat in my studio for over a year. It was one of those frustrating ones that I wasn't sure how to finish, or it just wasn't there yet. And we crossed over into the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd and the political divide, and I found a way to finishing it. I will talk a little bit about the cast container series here. I was concerned about recycling and the earth and the plastics that were in my recycle bin, and began to experiment with them, casting into the negative spaces of these containers. For me, I have some health issues, and for me, eating healthy became a dominant theme in my life, and going for an anti-inflammatory diet. It's weird to bring that into art, but I was eating a lot of salads in a box, which is all very convenient, but these boxes had some pretty cool designs on them, and I began to think what would happen if I cast out of those, and also in some ways give light to the artist. Some industrial designer actually designed these containers. So I began casting out of them, and then manipulated them after because I love process, and I don't work with just one material, so it's multiples. I'll introduce ceramic or porcelain objects, or in this case, resin and rubber. So for this piece, I had gone further along within the cast container series and began to cut and carve the containers and create new molds from that. And this is an example of one. This was a salad container that I cut up and created a mold and cast it from that. And then this divot, and most of the work from the series in some way relates to the body. To me, there's a feeling of skin or flesh. And I was also thinking a lot about archaeological issues and how we want to move forward as a society, as a civilization, and what will they say about us in 100, 200, 300,000 years when they discover our archaeological diggings, you know. And the concrete I chose to cast in white. I have my own mixes, my own special similarity to you. my own special mixes. And I like the white because it is similar to bones. A lot of people confuse it with plaster, but it's not. I love plaster. Actually, plaster was my first love. Always loved working with that material, but it's not a permanent material. And I want somehow my work to exist either indoors or outdoors. I'm very interested in going after public art and having more art in the public sphere where more people have access to it. So this piece in particular, after casting it and having it around the studio, this little divot meant a lot to me. And I began to be very upset by the current situations happening and felt very disheartened, very afraid, and likened it in some ways to the feeling of trying to relax, getting in the bathtub, for those of you that take a bath, and sitting there and finding that even though you've stopped the drain, it's still drained down, and you're stuck with this little puddle left, and what do you do? So that's where it came from, that's where the title came from. And it kind of marks one of the last pieces from my cast container series that ends it, because when the pandemic hit, and I did finish this, but I began to tack away a little bit in a different direction. I've been using concrete in slightly different ways and creating castings out of tin ceiling tile so that I'm getting the texture of tin ceiling tiles, and specifically how when we were all in lockdown, we were all staring at the ceiling, out at the window. So if you actually look on my website, donnaconklin.com, you can see I have a piece in the Summit Public Art Program, which is a 20-foot wide, 8-foot high sculpture made from 15 panels that were cast out of tin ceiling tiles and then gone back into, as I was casting those pieces, they would crack and break, and I would simply put them back together. Because one of the themes that runs through all of my work, this piece is not the best example, but is the art of kintsugi, which is a Japanese technique for healing pottery, and the philosophy that something that's given you a lot of time or is aging shouldn't be simply discarded. We live in a culture of a lot of discarding everything, right? Even these plastic containers that we've been discarding. So rather than just discard this thing, repair it, make it more beautiful than it was by putting gold leaf in the cracks. So the piece that I have in the Summit Public Art Program also has a lot of cracking in it, and those cracks are healed. There is silver leaf in the piece. And I used what people think is paint. It's actually concrete stains. So all the materials used in construction are in that piece. And on the back of that piece also is the Amanda Gorman poem, or two lines from it, 4 lines from it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. So that was after this piece, but those pieces in the cracking and the breaking of them, and this even does exhibit some cracks and breaks in it, are again artifacts. Artifacts that are meant to be discovered later, or the idea that as a civilization we can continue to improve and grow and come together. I also have spheres and other concrete sculptures at the Reemergence Arboretum. I have 2 sculptures there that are spheres, also very colorful, very different from this series, because this is all white. And this whole container series is all white until somehow the pandemic, I wanted to bring joy into the work. Somehow the plain white also was getting a lot of feedback that it was looking like plaster, which I didn't want that. A lot of materials and textures, and using doilies and as both imprints and positive forms in the work. So I think I'll pause there and take any questions if anyone might have some.
Yeah, absolutely.
How heavy is that piece?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm going to guess around 20, 27 pounds, maybe, not even that much. I have it written on the back. I got to a point where I got myself a scale and I weigh everything, so I know exactly what everything weighs, and I write it on the back and I have it in information.
Right.
So there are blends that you can make in concrete that make the work lightweight. It kind of turns, there are stucco recipes. I mean, construction materials are really, and also, thanks for that reminder, The reason I love concrete also is it is one of the most commonly used construction materials in the world. And it's beautiful material. It's very versatile. It can be colored, it can be cast, it can be formed. So.
Yeah, just additionally about the concrete, what I find so interesting about pairing these two artists together is concrete is another ancient, very ancient
Yes.
material, and really technology that allowed, you know, civilizations to really grow and
The
build
Romans.
and create, you know, architecture that, you know, the world had never really seen before. And so it is another material like ceramics that has so much history connected specifically with society and civilization, which you know, with both of your interests in, you know, kind of artifact and history, it has that content, that form again, has a lot of meaning, I think, in your work.
Most of our homes, houses, buildings are all made with the very foundations, the very thing that holds up these buildings and structures are cinder blocks, which are made from cast concrete.
And this specific building is almost entirely concrete and glass and steel, but yeah, part of a very important architectural movement as well.
Yes, wow, I had it and then it went away.
Brutalism.
Brutalism,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely.
So I love the idea of having that material and using it and pushing the boundaries with this, because I don't know of any artists doing that. There are some out there, and part of a couple of groups that are exploring concrete in new ways.
Yeah.
So,
Just another comment, I guess. Another interesting is just combining these three materials that are so, just so beautifully capture a mold, you know, using concrete and resin, and then even the rubber stopper, which, you know, the rubber stopper, I think maybe was commercially made, or did you?
no doubt, I did not make the rubber stopper.
But it's still, just checking, because it's also, you know, that's also coming out of a mold as well, right?
That's true, I believe it is.
Yeah, so there are these three materials that are kind of coming together that like really take forms beautifully and can transform as well. And I'm curious about your use of the resin here and in general.
Actually, yeah. I love resin. I love combining concrete and resin. There are people doing it in different ways. And I have largely used it to fill spaces, and also I often put silver leaf behind it so I get a reflective quality from that. I color it. The resin is very forgiving and can be colored in translucent and transparent and opaque ways. So it's a very interesting material. I'm not sure about the permanence of it though. Like, I don't know that this piece would last outside. I don't know what the resin would actually do
Sure.
over a long period of time. But that's something I'm always concerned with, because I do want my work to be, you could hang it anywhere, outside of your house, outside of a building.
Yeah.
So yeah, there always has to be some aspect of the personal in anything I make. And I do some research, but not a huge amount. I'm more interested in the making. I'm more interested in materials and textures and color and silver. And lately, beautiful things. I really want there to be meaning, but also I want you to look at it and kind of be happy. Because so much of the last several years have been brutal.
Yeah.
So, and I want it to somehow connect us all,
Yeah.
make us all feel the joy. So. Yes?
Donna, the crevice, did that come naturally, or did you plan that?
I planned that. I did plan that. I needed it to have more than just a flat surface. I needed it to undulate and feel human in some way, or like it was. So to me, I see it. I feel very much like flesh. And last year, actually, I started experimenting more with more three-dimensional than this, which I feel very flat wall pieces. Although I have a lot of wall pieces, I've been doing some fabric casting. So I've actually been sewing forms and pouring concrete into them and experimenting with that. You can see some of that on my Instagram. Donna _Conklin _studios. And you can come to my studio tour, which is at Manufacturers Village in East Orange at 364 Glenwood Avenue on October 15th and 16th. We open our doors to the public from 1 to 6, both days, and you can see the artists and the work and the studios of over 60 artists.
Amazing.
So,
I'm thinking puddle, would you also display horizontally instead of just hanging on a wall?
I would, and it would be obvious what it was in that
Yeah.
instance. It would feel more like a bathtub, but I think this kind of confronts the body in a different way. Standing up, you're actually, it's at this part of your being, which is where we feel emptiness, is where the heart is. So. I've also, to be honest, I've had a lot of floor work that I've made, and I find it very difficult. People don't want to show it because it takes up a lot of space, and people are going to trip on it, and there's all sorts of curatorial issues.
Yeah, are there any other questions?
Anybody?
For-
Anyone else?
I have a question for both of you.
Yeah.
Do you envision your work before you start it?
No, for me that's actually, I don't want to envision it exactly before I start it. I have an idea in mind,
Right.
but I don't always end up in the same
Right.
place, and I much prefer it that way. For me, it's about the process. It's about kind of evolving and evolution. It's exciting for me that way. I don't like to actually know exactly what I'm making and make it, because to me that's boring. I mean,
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too, Donna. Yeah, thanks. When I'm making my work as well, it's totally spontaneous. Yeah, totally. Like I don't even draw until after the fact. Like, so I kind of see them as like I'm an archaeologist. So once they're all finished, that's when I draw. I draw them when they're done. So I don't even have an idea what they're going to look like. I don't even have a title until I finish taking pictures of the work. Because I want them to be like immediate when I'm making the form, because when I'm actually making that mark, it'll go very, very slow. So like, it lets those three pieces with like, I guess the vision piece, that would have took me about 6 hours straight. Not just doing the form, I'm talking about after the form, 6 hours straight of me just making that mark. And when I make that mark, I'm not taking breaks. So I'm sitting in my chair in my studio, just making one mark at a time.
You're in the moment.
Yep. And it's slow, it's a slow, I'm becoming one with the form. To the point that I don't go to the bathroom. I don't eat, I just keep making that mark. And then once I'm done, then I'm like, oh man, I'm hungry. Oh, I better go to the bathroom. You know what I mean? Because I become one with the work.
so for me, actually, I like having conversations with the work itself, and it'll give me, it'll talk back to me and tell me where it might lead to, or what this texture might say about something that's been on my mind or that's going on in the world. So absolutely, no. I actually, funny, I had done an apprenticeship at the Johnson Atelier many years ago, and when the casting process I found very stifling, because you would make a piece and then you would go through this entire process to cast it, and something felt removed for me. Like I like to have my fingers on it. I like to have my hands in it. I have to touch it. I have to be right on it. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Yeah. I'm kind of just thinking about it now. There's sort of an immediacy too about the materials that you use. There's only
That's true,
so
yeah.
much time you have to manipulate clay before it dries, or concrete.
Oh yeah.
Same with rust. You do have to spend those 6 hours in a row working, because you can only do so much to keep clay wet. And yeah, concrete there's a ticking time, their time is
Yeah.
winding down. That's
Once you
before can
cast,
do
you're
it.
stuck. You have to wait until it's still. But I could still go and carve it. So it's not, for me, it's not like permanent. I still can always manipulate it.
Right.
There's still always ways to manipulate it.
Yeah.
I think ceramic, once you fire it, you're done.
Unless you want to refire, but
Right.
that image is going to, that form is going to stay.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a question. How did you get interested in doing cement? Because it's not always, available choice.
No, I actually, actually back when I was at the Johnson Atelier as an apprentice, I made a piece, I did a cast bronze sculpture that needed a base, and I decided to make molds and cast concrete base. That was the very first time I ever worked with concrete, and I was able to add materials to it to make it glitter. It kind of had really a glitter to it. And I left that for a while. Again, I love working with different materials. I did some more concrete work and colored it in grad school. Left to do other things. I did a lot of drawing. I have a drawing background. I love to draw, and actually University of Iowa was a consideration when I was going to look for an MFA program, but because I was thinking of doing an MFA in drawing. But anyway, I digress. So I kind of came back to the concrete work after doing some more plaster work, and again needed a permanent material and began to experiment with it and found it to be just my thing. It was my voice for sure. It's readily available, it's easy to find, it's not expensive, really, generally. And it's got, again, a lot of diversity to it. I can make different recipes, different batches for my needs. Something's more lightweight, something's a little more dense. I can pigment the concrete itself, or I can stain it afterwards. I can carve it, I can, pour it into molds, and I can form it over a steel armature too, make it like clay.
So you just basically got the materials and played with it, and because I feel like you never really see a class on how to do something in cement,
Yeah.
You see clay and things like that.
I would love to run a class on how to work with concrete, but I don't know that there are that many people. I would try it. I would try it. I mean, it happens. I know there's an artist in the South that does it, and very successfully teaches a lot of artists. And I'll teach you a little thing about concrete, okay? Cement, and no offense to you, no.
Oh, okay.
Cement is to concrete what flour is to bread. So cement plus an aggregate and water equals concrete. I didn't even know that for a while, so I love telling people that because I like being a teacher too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Last chance?
Yeah, we could probably only, we're almost out of time, so if there are any burning questions. And if not, then thank you so much. And thank you, Donte and Donna, for just really wonderful presentations and such enlightening conversation. Thank you, audience, for being so participatory. I had questions prepared that I didn't even really have to use because they kind of came out in your wonderful presentations, and you guys were so wonderful. So thank you, and this happens every month through the end of the exhibition with a little break in December, just because of weather and holidays. But yeah, the sort of Wednesdays at 12:15, we have these rack cards that have the full schedule, and we hope you come back. And I think by the end of this week, we'll also be releasing our digital catalog of the work in this show. So, please go to our, I think it'll be on our museum website. It'll be there. You can find it, as well as the New Jersey State Council of the Arts website. Thank you.
Thank you.